Welcome, everyone. You're listening to How We Heal the podcast. I'm Kir Noel, medical intuitive, your host. Our sponsor is the medicinebuddhawithin.com, intuitive training for all. Check out their website and be registered to be invited to all the upcoming trainings. Now let's begin our show. Hi, everyone. This is How We Heal the podcast. I'm Kir Noel. Today, my guest is Melissa Sklarz. She's a politician representing the 30th AD in Queens. She's currently also the vice chair of the New York State Democratic Party and secretary of the Queens Democratic Party. Anyone in politics in New York and beyond knows her and knows of her. She's also a veteran trans rights activist and a person who has made history and creates opportunities for people in all communities to be given fair shakes and their rights. So thank you so much for being here, Melissa. I'm honored that you join me in my my podcast world experience, and how amazing that we know each other as long as we do, 35 years. Quite a ride. So the point of this podcast, the premise of it is that the audience and I love to hear about how you got to become the leader and the advocate and the human being that you are in the world. How did you become Melissa?
Well, Kir, it's an honor and privilege to be here with you today. It's so wonderful to see you. As we both know, as one ages, life goes in many different directions. And before we started today, I will always be grateful to the kindness you showed to me many years ago when I was really struggling. And so the least I could do today is spend some time with you and your audience.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's very sweet. You're making me, I'm going to cry.
Yay, my work here is done. You know, becoming Melissa was an impossible journey. I'm older than a lot of your viewers and listeners. And, you know, I was born in the early 50s, and I came into age in the 1960s. And it was a time where there was really no social media. There were no computers, no cable TV, no telephones. And it was a million children that were born after World War II, when all those soldiers came home and got married. Wherever we went, there was an army of children. And to try to find one's way was very difficult. It was done via instinct. And everyone feels different when they're children. The idea is to find your tribe, and fitting in is important. You know, I was very clever and I was nimble on my feet. I brought a lot of tricks to the party. And so I was able to fit in, but I always felt different. I always had a strange, inane sense of my identity, of looking in the mirror and seeing a stranger. And I figured, well, the time will come and I will outgrow this thing. My dad looked like your classic Neanderthal. He was short and stout and covered with hair. And I went, that's not the look for me. And as I got older, I kept waiting for these changes to my body. And you know what? My higher power, my God, was looking out for me. And so my dad and my brother had these huge hands and feet, and I certainly never did. My little brother is much taller than me, and I was able to stay small-ish.
That sounds like you felt different in your original family. You felt different.
I was the oldest of three kids, and so I had my role. And my role was our family was like the Jets and the Sharks. For your younger viewers, this is from West Side Story. Google it. And it was warfare. And I was the social worker in the middle, trying to keep the two sides apart. But that took a toll on me, because at the end of the day, I was unsettled. I was fearful. my quickness, my nimbleness, my intelligence did not help my heart heal. So I started acting out at a very young age. I did lots of different things. I set fires. I broke things. I got in trouble. I was detained by the authorities a few times. As I got older, I got involved in sports, and that worked for a while. And then as I got to be a teenager, all of my childish things stopped working. And that's when I discovered cigarettes and drugs and alcohol. And it didn't fix anything. It just made me care less. And I didn't feel so unsettled and uncomfortable in my own skin.
Well, we can relate on that, as you know. I mean, I struggled in my 20s too, and just would have blown my life up. Yeah, I had to let that. Yeah, I think you're going down the same path I went.
In my early 20s, I went to a series of colleges. I ended up going to 4 different colleges. I flunked out of the second college because of my substance abuse. I tried to get a master's degree, but I quit. My focus was so misdirected and my discomfort was so intense. I would say in the mid 70s, I was upstate New York. I probably cross dressed in public for the first time. That's what it was called back then. I had I lived a life filled with secrets, and I compartmentalized everything as to which part of my life was about family or school. But then I had my very personal life. I discovered that none of my little friends had that same conflict of gender that I did. And so I learned to keep that quiet and keep it to myself. And
Wow.
I would say by my mid 20s, my substance abuse became out of control and I began to spiral and I was in trouble.
Was anyone in your family having that expression of disturbance by using substances around you? Did that kind of bring you to that idea that there's a good escape in this, or you found it on your own?
My family background is Jewish, and Jews and alcohol. I've been to enough 12-step meetings to know that different groups use alcohol a lot. There was some drinking in my family. There was some drinking, and what I did was this was an era of drugs. So I used to do drugs and then I would get crazy. So then I would drink to offset the drugs and try to even it all out. And so I ended up doing just too much drinking and too much drugging. And by my late 20s, I was done and I had to do something dramatic. And so I moved out of the United States for 3 years and moved to the Middle East. And
Oh,
then
wow, that's dramatic.
living in the big city in the Middle East without cocaine drove me crazy. I was very drunk most of the time. It made going to work very difficult. And so after 6 months, I decided to transfer to the work site in the desert. So I lived in the desert for 2.5 years. That's how I tried to deal with my substance abuse. I was drunk every day, but I managed. I was hidden away from society and culture. I was deemed safe by the women on the job. When you think of an overseas construction worker, I am probably not what comes to mind, but I did that for 3 years. Needless to say, many of them went on to other jobs, and rumors of my sexuality and of my drug use made me a less desirable candidate to continue.
So, Melissa, what was what was the work you were? I'm interrupting. What is the work you were doing in the Middle East?
I started out in accounting. I ended up from there in purchasing, and I finished a job in the engineering department, all clerical work.
Mhm.
I have no experience in driving a bulldozer or anything like that. It was 200 Americans, 100 British, and 2,000 men from Thailand that built this airbase. It's still being used today in Israel. It was military at first. I think they've transitioned to commercial.
So you found you tried to escape yourself by going to the Middle East, it sounds like.
Well, I paid off all my drug debts. I saved money, something I had never done before. And so in my early 30s, I returned to New York City filled with piss and vinegar, and things got much worse. And I would say my 30s were gruesome. Yeah, I was not afraid I was going to die. I was afraid I wouldn't die, and my life would just get worse and
Sorry.
worse. And by the I had a job that I hated so much. They hated me so much. It was a match made in heaven. And I
Made it
hung in
help.
there. I hung in there because I thought that was a good thing. And it was miserable for everyone. It's a miracle they let me stay at this job, now years later. But I was somewhat bitter after they finally fired me. I think the turning point here for me was finally rationalizing lying about myself, where I stopped paying my phone bills, I stopped paying electricity, then I stopped paying rent. And I did not pay rent for 6 months. And through a series of difficult court ordered processes, they finally evicted me and got me out. Things were different then. This would have been the late 1980s. So my roommate was an escort, as we say today, a sex worker. And she was there when the marshal came and put a big padlock in the door and threw all my stuff away. And so it was come to Jesus moment. I had to do something. I had to go somewhere. And so I went to rehab and I learned a lot about different things, but it didn't help me. So after I went to rehab, I started going to 12-step meetings, and there I found my tribe, all the people that I used to do drugs and drink with. And there they were in all these little church basements all over New York City.
Your people, my people. Many
And
times the 12-step groups are out there for anyone listening. They're still there. They're fabulous.
in my days, people did a lot of cocaine. Now it's crystal meth. And I've been to some of those groups with crystal meth people, and there are many of them. And it made me think back to the crack era in New York City. What happens when I stopped drinking and doing drugs, the first thing I was taught about getting honest. And I said, well, I built my life on a bedrock of lies, and I don't know how to be honest. I've been lying since I was 3 and 4, and now what am I going to do? And the message was very clear. The only way you can save your life is to get honest. And I'm thinking, yeah, but what about, what if, and all those rationalizations. And the message was always the same. You have to get honest. And so, in spite of everything, when I was in rehab, I said, I don't feel like a guy. I feel like a girl. And they said, we know exactly what you're feeling. And they said, but if downtown in Manhattan, there's the gay center, you should speak to them. And they had a program in those days called the Gender Identity Project, and run by a visionary named Dr. Barbara Warren, who's now at Mount Sinai. The center no longer has this program, but in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a reawakening or reevaluating about gender identity. What if a journey in gender is just not medical and biological? What if it's also cultural? What if it's a spectrum that involves a whole range of people and not just the Harry Benjamin type 6. Harry Benjamin wrote a book called The Transsexual Phenomenon in 1966, implying that there was a range of gender identity from different extremes, people in the middle. Harry Benjamin worked with Christine Jorgensen and so on. And Gender Identity Project opened the door for all sorts of people, and wouldn't you know it, they had a place for me. And normally, the old school trans women were all very, very, very feminine, and they looked like models, or they were sex workers. Those successful trans women were those that could hide from being trans and appeared to be born female. Someone like me, who was a varsity athlete in high school and played intramural sports in college, there was no room. It was new and different. But I was told to save my life, I had to get honest. And I leaped into the unknown. I have no idea what's going to happen next. Luckily, my job fired me, so I had a lot of time now to
I read about that.
ponder my identity and my place in the world. Yes, I was at work. Well, I don't know if it was learning to live life. So transitioning from male to female is, you know, it's one thing when you're young. Of course, as you know from reading the paper now, that Donald Trump has decided that transitioning young should be made against the law. Donald Trump is now our gender identity expert, and he has decided that it should be illegal for children to transition young, and it should be illegal for doctors to help them. So this is now that the science of the 21st century is all ready to help trans people, Donald Trump has decided that that should be illegal.
Well, he's speaking, he's 20, excited because that's what his base told him to say. We're not surprised. We're not surprised.
So what happens is the longer you wait, the more a person is stamped by being other. It becomes more and more difficult to mesh in with our culture, which is basically half are male and half are female.
And also very hetero, and meaning that tradition that we think of man and a woman, one man, one woman, is still alive and well in most of the country.
The funny thing about politics, and we can talk about politics if you want, is there's always going to be 1/3 of our nation, 250 years, that is reactionary, that they don't care about the future, that the lessons of the past are good enough. And then there's going to be another, I don't know, 40% that's like, well, that new idea might be good. And so now you have the middle, and it's always the fight over that middle to decide old ideas versus new ideas. I live in New York City. It's not a coincidence I live in New York City. New York City is open to exploring new ideas. Some work and some do not, but exploring them is always worth the challenge. And so we do that here, such as having a gender identity project at the LGBT Center in 1990 was something new and different. And so slowly but surely, I began to transition. I used the medicine that was available at the time, and I transitioned. The people in the group were very supportive to my face, behind my back. They said, never in a million years with this one. But they were great. They were friendly. They were kind. They were supportive. I learned to surround myself with kind and supportive people. Your viewers should know that having negative voices and negative people in your life helps no one. It doesn't help the negative people, and certainly doesn't help us. And so over time, I was able to figure out, who can I count on for love and support that can help me become me. So that's
Very important. Amazing. So, Melissa, I don't want to talk about political issues, but I wanted to ask you how you got into politics. Why did you end up opening that door? That's like, interesting choice.
well. In my quiet times, it's almost like a cop out. What I found the man of my dreams at a later age. He has four legs and a tail, and his name was Puss. Um,
The
you
best
know, I
friends.
did dating. I dated a lot of men. I found that they liked the idea of me rather than me. And
Hmm.
I was very disappointed. They're not really supportive. They just like the idea of me naked and in bed. And rather than see me as a person, they saw me as an object. I don't know how unique it is, but it was unique for me. And I did that for a while, and then I stopped. I just did not really find what I was looking for there. And so there I was, I'm not really dating. I have time. Eventually what happened, I was able to, through my connections at the gay center, I found work opportunities. I was out of work for 4 years, and then I started getting gigs and then part-time jobs and then temporary jobs. And eventually, years, I was able to get a full-time job at the Actors Federal Credit Union in Times Square, the Actors Equity Credit Union. And I went there from part-time to full-time to a manager and ended up a director. And I stayed there for 19 years. Now
Great
that
gig.
I'm to figure out how to feed myself and keep a roof over my head and could see a doctor without getting bankrupt, I still had energy. I still had interest. I studied political science in college. In my part of New York City, politics were being run by gays and lesbians. I went, huh, isn't that interesting? And so I
Hmm.
started showing up, and the only trans women they saw were in the meat market at midnight. And they weren't really used to seeing trans women in an office stopping by, offering to help out. And so I got to know people. Kir, my superpower is knowing people. I
Hmm.
know, but it started there with people like Christine Quinn and Tom Duane and Arthur Schwartz, Deborah Glick, eventually Jerry Nadler. So that West Side Manhattan. And it turns out that they said, you have, they were shocked I went to college, and they said, you're clever and nimble. What if we put you on the ballot and we can have you selecting judges? And I said, huh, I never considered that. And so in 1999, I was in the ballot. I was the first trans woman on a ballot in New York City to be a judicial delegate to select judges in the Judicial Convention. We campaigned. There were 3 different slates running. There were 11 slots, 33 people, absolute chaos. And I think I came in 5th out of 33 and became a
Fantastic.
judicial delegate in 1999 as an out trans woman. We have campaign flyers and everything because my people figured this is different. This will attract attention for this tiny little position. And that's how it started.
Well, your superpower, you know, is you learn to be yourself with a group of people. You learn to just be Melissa and
I
not
learned
hold.
to be with people that were supportive. The if I learned to get comfortable with me, people pick up on that. I
Yeah, they
mean,
do.
as what started as handing out flyers on West 14th Street for a political campaign. I now travel the world scuba diving. I have been everywhere. Been to Micronesia twice and Indonesia and Philippines and all through the Caribbean. And there aren't a lot of other trans people I run into on that journey. But it starts with surrounding myself with, as I learn to get comfortable with me, that they get to get comfortable with me. But it's got to start from within.
Well, and just making peace with who we are, which is I'm not going to apologize for being me, and I'm this person. Whatever I am, I am. That is a very attractive feature in anyone, in my opinion, because you're not interested in judging other people. You're not sizing them up. You're not gaming anybody. You're just being present. Isn't that what it is? It's being present. So, Melissa, you're present.
The
So, these
you know
scuba trips I've noticed, you do quite a.
I back in my day, yeah. But now there is a whole international network of people all over the world that connect based on their gender identity. We've gone out of the binary and now into a non-binary world. Again, a new idea that what if I'm neither male nor female? Can I fit in? Is there a place for me in the
Hmm.
workplace? Can I find love as being, of course, we don't know if it'll work, but the idea is out there and people are making that an important part of their lives. I am very binary. But people come to me and I'm willing to learn. I am not confounded or confused by they, them pronouns.
Yeah, me
People
neither.
showed me grace when I was a baby trans woman, and I could show these people grace because love and support carries a long way.
It does. And I think when you talk about becoming you, and I thought there was a piece of it that I wanted to share about. I think most of this transformation we go through in life and journey is our spiritual awakening. That, who you are, who I am, was in there, and we needed to be around good people who said, "Who are you? Be who you are. We love you. Be who you are." And so you picked them as an adult, so did I. And everything in my life got simple because I don't sit around speaking with people who are in their judgment or people who want to control. They're both on the same plate as far as I'm concerned. So this political work you do is it's quite moving how much you've been involved in new legislation, especially in New York. Tell us about Genda. What is Genda?
What happened is we formed a group in 1997 called Niagara, and it was a New York Association for Gender Rights Advocacy. And it was New York City, and said, well, every other group has civil rights. We should create legislation to bring civil rights for trans people. And so we did all the things that groups do. We had a group of people. The personalities were awful. The struggle was intense. But in the end, we were able to create a format, a set of demands, and a roadmap to making sure that New York City would pass legislation that would recognize that 0.75%, which in New York City would be, in a city of 9 million people, I don't know, 100,000 people would be trans identified. And these people need protection. They need protection in the workplace, in the home, in school, on the streets, at the gym. And so this is the law. This is what needs to be done. And at the time, we approached the mayor by the name of, Rudy Giuliani. Well, that didn't go very well. He was not that impressed. But 2001, New York City elected Michael Bloomberg. And in May 2002, after he'd been mayor for 5 months, there was a new city council. We had a day-long presentation for city council. And after 20 minutes, they said, stop. What do you want? They said, we have these guidelines. Okay. These guidelines, who's in favor? I am. Okay, it's passed. Thank you. Next. And in an hour, guidelines were accepted by the city council and passed. We sent it to the mayor, and the mayor signed it. So in May 2002. And it's like, wow, this is amazing. We should try New York State. So in 2001, the gays and lesbians passed the bill. They've been working on their civil rights bill for 15 years. We tried to get them to change the language at the last minute to include gender identity and gender expression. They said, no, we've been working on it for 15 years. And their bill passed, signed by Republican Governor George Pataki. They made a deal with the state legislature that the gays and lesbians would support a Republican for attorney general. Can you imagine such a thing? And then the Republican governor would sign it, and that's what happened. And so trans people were on our own. And 3 of us got into a little room in Albany, and we sat there filled with despair. It's like, now what?
Mm-hmm.
And so Charles King, who was the founder, executive director of Housing Works, goes, well, we'll just create a standalone trans bill. And I was like, that'll never happen. And he goes, well, what are we going to call it? Well, the gay rights bill was called SONDA, Sexual Orientation Non-Discrimination Act. And he'll go, we'll call our bill GINDA, Gender Identity Non-Discrimination Act. Now, I don't like drinking. I said, how about Gender Expression Non-Discrimination Act? And they said, sure. And so we called it GENDA. And it only took 18 years for the bill to go from that room for the Governor Cuomo to sign it into law.
18
Now,
years journey.
it's
Yeah.
a lot, But as we can see now with the current environment, changing the law is actually the simple part. It's changing the culture that the real work begins.
True, true. Well, you also, you live in a state that does reform and change and grow, which is an amazing part of the world.
It's not growing here. They've done an estimate for the year 2030, and we're going to lose another 2 congressional seats. So in the 1960s, New York was called the Empire State because it was the largest state in the country. Well, now we are the fourth largest state, and we are shrinking. And you
Wow.
know, with with central air conditioning, places that used to be swamps are now very popular, such as Texas and Florida.
Oh, that's right. And the governments there are somewhat attractive to people who want to carry firearms quite a lot. Yeah, and promote non-inclusion. So we lost some people. I'm so sorry to hear that, but I guess they want to leave. I'm sorry for that. Do you feel inspired at this juncture in your work life in the Democratic Party? Do you feel the work has just begun, or are you stepping back from it now that you're a big grown up like me? We're in the age category where my friends, many of them are retiring, and I'm like, no, I'm just getting started. Just getting started. I feel like now I have the wisdom to carry me forward without all the drama. How do you feel about the current situation we're in for you?
The last six I was representing New York in the last six Democratic conventions. The last three, I was a delegate in 2016. I was in the Electoral College, and the vice chair of the New York State Democratic Committee. So I'm sort of all in. I am open to
Great.
change. I remember the 2016 nomination where Hillary Clinton fought to the death to get that nomination against an old guy from Vermont, and so he's still around, I think, but his ideas have taken root, and so the Democratic Party has to change. Our party is much more diverse, and our party has to be open to diverse changes. And there's a new generation that discovers. I came of age at a time where people that had jobs could also afford a home. And now the number of people in New York to be able to keep a roof over your head, to feed themselves, and go see a doctor, to do all three is tiny. It's a very small group of people. And people say the Democrats have to do better to make sure you can keep a roof over your head, food in your stomach, and to see a doctor if you get sick. And so it means we're going to have to change. We thought raising money would be the answer. It is not. So we're going to have to open to new ideas. Here in New York, we now have a Democratic Socialist as mayor, and
Right.
his first 3 weeks, he's done a great job.
Yeah, there's transformation going on everywhere in spite of the drama and the control. So I'm inspired to say, yay, we still have chances to make this turn around a little bit. Well, and I very much believe that we're connecting now in a whole nother way with each other. And there's this separation that has been artificially created and institutionalized on social media and in media. I don't think people are swallowing it as much as they used to. There's not enough payoff. Let me put it that way. There's nothing coming down the pike that's going to make you feel good about what's going on. So I'm so appreciative you're here today. And if I wanted to, and I was interested in politics, especially, I want to encourage young people to get involved and volunteer and be an advocate for rights, for human rights, for female, for reproductive rights, for trans rights, for all our rights. Can someone reach out to you on a social media platform and say, I've listened to the podcast. I want to volunteer. Is there any place for anyone to find you, Melissa, that would be
Well,
comfortable for you?
finding me is easy, Kier. Right now, I mean, I did my thing this morning, which is to go to party headquarters and review candidates for to be elected civil court judge. So at this point, I'm involved really in making sure that we get our candidates on the ballot. But our mayor here, if people are interested in cultural change, the mayor has set up his own organization, just like Hillary and Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders had their organizations. So people want to get connected. It's really easy. There's the Working Families Party. There's Make the Road. There's Planned Parenthood. There are organizations here in New York that are set up are reproductive rights, for immigrant rights, for LGBTQ rights, and of course, for progressive rights as led by our mayor. So it's easy. Your listeners all have computers and they know that the world is at their fingertips, not like when you and I were 18-year-old and going to the library and the Dewey Decimal System and figuring out where we could get information so that we could discover a world that was invisible to us. The world is visible to everyone at their fingertips. All you got to do is look. I am easily, effortlessly available, as you know.
Thank you. I know. I found you, Melissa, online, and we've, hadn't connected in 30
No,
plus years, and here we found each other again. I'm so happy.
yay.
And so tell us about you love diving. What is it about diving you love? I mean, that's what you post a lot about, which I love watching these beautiful, you go on these trips, an amazing part of the world where the diving it's spectacular, I'm sure. So how did you find diving? What drove you there?
I went 30 years without a passport. So in the old days, back in the old days, if your birth certificate and your identity were different, a person could not get a passport. And Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, they changed that. So with a series of doctors, and they created a series of 3 or 4 hoops. If you jump through these hoops, you can get a passport. And the first time I applied, they just said, no, sorry, girl, not going to happen. The second time they said, okay, Melissa Sklarz, sex male. Third time, Melissa Sklarz, sex female. And they got it right. And I was excited that I had not had a passport since I lost all my possessions in 1990. So this was almost 25 years. And I showed 2 friends. I said, look, I got a passport. And they said, we're going scuba diving in October in Costa Rica. You should come with us. And I had learned to scuba dive when I was in the Middle East in 1981. And I hadn't really thought of it much. I said, okay, I don't have a partner. It's not like we're going to go on a romantic vacation to Paris together. Let me do this scuba thing. And I did it. And I discovered I liked it and I had a skill for it, and that there was a group of queer people that traveled the world together and do this activity. So the fact that I liked it, the fact that I was decent at it, and that I could share the experience with like-minded queer adventurers made it seem like this is a great deal. So I started slowly, and now I have made up for lost time. Although I think I have peaked. I have been, you can't scuba in Hudson River, but I've been to Indonesia and Philippines. I've been to Micronesia twice, been all through the Caribbean. I'm now looking at Cuba and Honduras and maybe even the Maldives in the Indian Ocean. I like it. I'm good at it. And it's a international group of queer people and their friends that do this together. And it makes it a great, wonderful, exciting, interesting hobby to have. I avoided expensive hobbies when I was young. And at this point, I can afford to spend some money on myself and do something extraordinary.
That's amazing. Yeah. I tried scuba diving in my 20s. I got licensed, a PADI license, and never went to the Caribbean because I didn't like it as much as you do.
I almost like the people. At this point, it's more the people than the activity. I
People.
got back
Yeah.
from Indonesia. Was there for 3 weeks. I did 43 dives. I'm happy to be home in my kitchen with you and my cat nearby and wondering what to feed her for dinner. It's simple, it's gentle.
Wonderful. And you get to connect with this whole world. You're just out in the world doing it. So thank you so much for being here today. I barely touched on the surface of what you have achieved and what you have contributed to in our politics and our ideologies and the way we view the world and each other and this beautiful, I remember meeting you and you were so good about staying real. You were so real. You said in the beginning of this podcast, you talked about you had to learn how to tell the truth to survive, to become who we are. We have to be able to tell ourselves the truth. So we start to say it out loud to someone else. And wow, what a powerful piece of information. Yeah, everyone listening, tell yourself the truth. Please don't hold it back. And Melissa, thank you so much. And anyone wanting to do any kind of service around the political situations, around rights, human rights, animal rights, get on, on your computer and open it and do something. I mean,
right now, what we're seeing is the mixture of racial civil rights and gender identity. So now it's a liberation movement. Now our trans rights movement is dominated by people fighting for liberation. Equality isn't enough. Equity isn't enough. Now the goal is liberation. So now is the time for young people that want to fight and make a difference. There are fighters that are out there really doing this, and they're effortless to find, and they can always use help and support.
That's great. It's a great time to be alive and watch things transform. That's how I feel. I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful. So, Melissa, thank you so much for being here. And please, everyone, connect with a place in your own world that you can help activate transformation, change, and healing. And yeah, you're not alone if you are a person who hasn't found their voice, because Melissa and I, come from the quiet side of despair into being loud and proud and who we are. So join us. All right, Melissa.
Thank you for reaching out. Wonderful to spend some time with you again today.
You too. It's great to be here with you. Bye, Melissa. We want to thank the following people: Jennifer Maidman for original music. Listen to her on iTunes and Spotify. True English of Upstate Podcast Studio for sound and recording engineering. And all our executive producers. See you next time.